What's going on, guys? Dan with PC Tech Hustle coming at you with another video, and today we got for you guys some more Dell Optiplex content, mainly because you asked for it and I provide. That's how this YouTube relationship works. But more on that in just a moment, and that's coming at you guys right now. Alrighty guys, so we got the Dell Optiplex back in hand, which we built up about a month ago. More on that as a recap in just a moment, but if you click the video because you want to see some Cyberpunk 2077 action, then I got a time code associated with that, so you can skip to that if that's all you're after. But if you're here for the full breadth of the video, being a Xeon upgrade, which we have on hand here, and you want to see the benchmark comparison between this CPU and the i3 that's in the system currently, then keep watching. But lastly, if you're new to the channel, then make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, and don't forget to take the bell notification icon. That way you're informed of whenever I drop content like this. So let's jump into a little recap of this build and take you through the process of doing the Xeon upgrade, follow that with some benchmarks, and obviously some Cyberpunk. Alrighty guys, so quick recap of the build here, and we actually did a video on this one if you're not aware, or if you're new to the channel. I'll have that up in the top right hand corner where you can see the total build process of us taking the Dell Optiplex and doing the upgrades that we have here currently. But at the high notes here, what we have is a weak processor, very weak, i3 4160. I wouldn't really recommend it unless you're doing just basic, gaming, nothing of the AAA style that we're going to embark on here soon. But then we also obviously ripped out the power supply, which we have an EVGA unit up here, 600 watt, and then threw in a Radeon RX 570. Left the default state of the RAM that it came in, which is 8 gigs. So aside from that, that's pretty much all we did. The idea here was I pulled you guys, being my subscribers, and hopefully some new subscribers if you're watching, and asked you guys if you want to see a upgrade of the processor. That way we can kind of get it more up to spec and more gamer ready for some of these more intensive titles. So what we got here as a cost alternative CPU to the i7 4790 or even the 4770, they are still very pricey in the used market. We got a Xeon, which is a server chip, which uses the same exact socket, same exact everything. Basically, they even look the same, they just got different names on them, but they do functionally do things differently. But effectively what we got is the same core clock speeds and thread count. So from the i3, we have just a lowly 2-core, 4-thread, hyper-threaded dual core, and now we're going up to a 4-core, 8-thread. So we're making a massive leap as far as cores that are available to us, as well as this turbo's up to 3.9 gigahertz. So we're also netting better clock speeds as well. So it's a win-win situation. And for the 70 bucks that I paid for this, which I'll put on screen here and in a link in the description below, it's a seriously awesome price to performance win. And still, this machine stays under $300 when you count it all together. So what's left to do for this video then being get this CPU installed, so that way we are swapping out our lowly little i3. Not really going to cover that much in the video just because I've covered CPU installations with you 1,000 different times, and if you're new, go check out some of my other videos. But running against the same benchmarks that we ran the i3 against. But lastly, and I want to make a quick point here, is with this Xeon, since it is an i7 4790 equivalent and we have a RX 470, we are basically meeting the minimum recommended spec, not the absolute minimum spec, because the absolute minimum spec is really down there, but we should be meeting the minimum recommended spec from Cyberpunk, the developers. So we should be able to get some, and I'm hoping for some decent gameplay. So, and if we do, then I want to definitely give you guys a recommendation for if you're wanting to get into that game, and maybe you haven't yet because the game is so demanding and there's been a lot of hype about that, then you at least have something that you can go on as far as getting a very low cost of budget entry PC up and running that'll play all the modern titles and even some of the very difficult to run AAA titles such as Cyberpunk. So let's get the CPU in and see what she can do. Alrighty guys, there we have the benchmarks ran that we previously ran with the i3, now with the Xeon in place, and I'm very, very happy to see the improvements that we made in performance, and the capability now of the system definitely feels vastly improved. It's a night and day difference. It's very awesome. So if you guys are looking to strictly just do that, then here you have it. With a lot of the major titles, you can have a lot of good fun and still keep a cost of a system under $300. But grand finale here, right? We want to see if this sucker can take on Cyberpunk. Now, I think with the improvements that we made over those titles previously in the benchmarks, I think we can stand to make a playable experience with Cyberpunk. But right now, what remains to be seen is what adjustments do we have to make. Obviously, we can't do any kind of RTX DLSS, any kind of this super high fidelity gameplay. But if you guys are looking to just pick up the game because it's a red hot title, it's got a great storyline, you just want to get to playing, then I want to see if I can provide you guys an option with that. So what more further ado to do here than being, let's cut over once we are done, obviously downloading the game here, but let's cut over and see live with the camera facing the monitor, no other things that could possibly intrude on our performance ability here, and see if this Dell Optiplex with the Xeon upgrade can take on the game. Alrighty guys, we are loaded up, ready to go with some Cyberpunk action. Got MSI Afterburner running so we can keep an eye on temps, utilizations, frame rates, all the good stuff. So here we go, let's load up and see if I can kind of get some areas that are busy and kind of just get a general idea of gameplay. Alrighty guys, so we are now loaded into just a saved location I had while playing the game. I'm not super far into the game yet, so we're here kind of in daytime Night City, kind of just looking around. I definitely can tell the motion blur isn't really helping out too well. It's almost kind of nauseating at this point. So there might be some of the settings that I left on the game from when it was on my main rig. So let's go take a look at some of the settings here real quick. I think actually it might have defaulted some auto settings here. Well, there's lots of high and ultras on right now, and honestly, don't know if that's gonna be good for us. So let's just take everything. So okay, so Ultra is what it was on. I think, again, I believe that was from when my originally saved game from my main rig. So let's take it down to high. And what that does is it looks like it kind of just takes down a lot of these more high-end settings here. So it turned off that chromatic aberration, contact shadows, took everything down to mediums and highs. Let's see how that goes. Let's just select to enable that. It is smooth feeling. So we kind of walk around here, look at this vendor. Okay, I mean, this really is pretty playable right now. I want to be able to stress it. Now, like I said, this kind of motion blur effect is kind of nauseating. I think it looks better when you're on like a higher refresh rate monitor, because my main monitor that I play the game on is 144 Hertz. We're actually on just a basic Dell 60 Hertz monitor. So I'm gonna turn off that motion blur. It's kind of almost making me sick here. One thing here to also note is, the resolution scaling, we're keeping at 100% so far right now, just because we wanna ensure that we're getting the max quality. This is something that you would start reducing if we're really finding problems. So I'm gonna turn that off. That is tons better. All right, so let's call up our vehicle real quick. So right now, before we get into the car, we're looking around, we're getting CPU utilization of about 50%-ish, and obviously our GPU is maxed out. That's kind of to be expected. The bottleneck probably is going to end up being the GPU, just because the RX 570, even though it's still a great, I would say, mid-range 1080p GPU, it definitely has its weaknesses, and it's a little bit older these days. So let's jump in the car here. See if we can kind of take it through some more high-speed rendering here. Doing pretty good. Frame rate's still maintaining around the 20s. Whoops, ran that dude over. This game also is not like a first-person shooter game, so we can't expect to get those high frame rates. And truly and honestly, you don't want it for this kind of game. You want more of the fidelity of the actual game, so long as it's smooth. So if we were lowering the settings and causing a higher frame rate, which we can do, it's going to put a lot more strain on the CPU. We may end up hitting some stutters. So key thing to look for here is up here where it says 20 FPS, that is my 0.01% low, 23 is my 1% low, 37 is the max, 30 is my, I believe my low, no, I'm sorry, 30 is my average, And then over here on the very left is my current. So I'm really trying to get it to dip. I'm moving the camera around like crazy here, and this is surprisingly playable, and I didn't have to do anything. I literally just set it to the, as we'll go check again here just to verify. In the graphics settings, I just set it to a custom level, which started at the high preset, and then the only thing we did was turn off motion blur just because I don't feel like this monitor works well with motion blur, and then left everything to the medium highs that it comes with. Resolution scaling still at 100%. So, oh, target frame rate. I didn't realize this was set to 30 right now. So that might be creating our smoothness. Let's just send it to the max here and let's see what kind of frames we'll get. Now I wonder if that's gonna cause some stuttering effect. Okay, now we're up into the, well, it's still maintaining about the same frame rates. I think I saw like 40 something there jump, but what we're after here is I'll reset my statistics within MSI Afterburner and we'll see if we get some hard dips. I mean, still kind of maintaining the same numbers. Let's go over this way. 33 frames. I mean, I think this is pretty playable. Let's get into a gunfight, get the police after us. Maybe that'll cause a extra bit of chaos into the game, so that way we can kind of see how the game runs. Oh, we're gonna die. What the heck? It's like some kind of police drone. Run away, get more health. I mean, this is still pretty playable. It's way better than I thought. That's for absolute sure. I'm not dipping hard on frame rate here. Can't kill that drone thing. I'm gonna get killed here in a second. Okay, so there's lots of chaos going on in the screen here, and I'm still, okay, so my 0.1% low is amazingly good for how hard this game is to run. I think if I were to cap the frame rate like I did back to 30, I feel like it's a bit better or smoother. Can I run away on this thing? Yeah. I mean, I am still kind of shocked to see how well the game is running here, all considering, you know, this is supposed to be the new age Crysis. I mean, yes, I don't have the settings on ultra, I don't have a high resolution, I'm playing on 1080p on a 60 hertz monitor, but the point of the matter here is the fact that you can go play the game on a low-end system. Okay, now I'm rendering in tons of city here, going across this bridge. It's hardly, oh, whoop, I died. I was looking at the city and smashed. Wait, what? Am I alive? What's going on here? Uh-oh. I might have experienced a weird anomaly like I've heard about with this game. So I'm like stuck right now. Like I clearly crashed. There's my bike, but I can't move. I don't know what happened. I feel like I should be dead, but I'm not. All right, so since we are kind of stuck here on the bridge, we ran into something, I thought we died, but we're still here. But anyway, I guess let's talk about the frames here. So averaging right now 35 frames a second. We see our low hit 23, according to MSI Afterburner. Our average being 31, our high being 47, our 1% low being 22, and 0.1% being 18. To be flat out honest with you, going into this game, I thought I was gonna see atrocious frames, like 30 frames a second at max, and extremely, maybe not even 30, to be flat honest with you. I'm actually surprised I'm seeing 30. I was more expecting something along the lines of, you know, in the teens, and then 1% and 0.1% lows being just purely atrocious. But anyway, so let's load up a different scene, something that might be, you know, obviously a little different. We don't have daylight city scene. Let's load up some nighttime scene and see if that helps kind of crush our performance. Maybe it won't, we'll see. All right, so a new scene loaded up, nighttime, which I think you can expect to be a bit harder to run due to all the lights and shadows and things going on. So far, we're just kind of moving our cursor around and looks still pretty good. Looks like it's still kind of maintaining the about the 30 FPS rate. Another thing too I want to point out to you guys is you might hear the misnomer that you need absolutely without a doubt 16 gigs of RAM to run high fidelity at AAA titles, and that simply just isn't true. Where you have more available RAM, the system is going to pull what's available to it. So right now I have 8 gigs total in the system and it's only pulling 6.2 gigs of usage. So we're we're fine. 8 gigs is playable. Would we get better frame rate with 16 gigs? There's a possibility, but I think it would be probably hard to measure. There could be some anomalies that cause some dips here and there that may not be related to RAM at all. So that would be a pretty tough thing to test. It would probably have to go through some pretty rigorous testing. But look, you know, we're in a nighttime setting here, which I think normally would cause kind of a more stressful situation. So not seeming like it so far. Let's call up our car again here and see if trying to render the nighttime does any worse for us at high speed while we move along driving our car. All right, we'll do a power slide here. I mean, this is absolutely playable. I'm almost tempted to just pop the graphical settings back up to ultra and see what kind of hit we take. Actually, let's do that. All right, so back in the menu here, we're just exploring what if we turn on ultra, it affects here. Okay, so actually I take that to high. Now here's one thing that could lower your performance. So actually, let's keep it on the high settings. I want to take field of view up to 100. So that's basically giving you your max field of view as you render in the game. This could inhibit performance a little bit. I actually did not notice that was on, or that was down to 80 before. All right, so high with a field of view now set at 100 because we just now realized that wasn't on before. Motion blur again, I don't want on. And then everything else is set to medium/high settings. Obviously no ray tracing going on. We don't even have a card that is anywhere near capable of doing something like that. And resolution scaling set to 100. Okay, let's see how this does. Basically, we just got a little more screen space. We went from 80% to 100%, and yeah, not really detecting anything. Might have dipped a little harder there down to like, let's reset our MSI Afterburner stats. All right, so we can see if there's a measurable set of dips. Actually, I feel like this is a better gameplay. That's usually what I set to on any game that I play, especially FPS games, to make sure my field of view is at 100%. We just missed that setting when we were tweaking around with things. But here we are going through the city, experiencing all the different lights and shadows and reflections. Basically 30 FPS. Again, as mentioned, we're experiencing all the lights and shadows and reflections. Now we've made the discovery that we didn't have our field of view at 100%, which we now increased to 100%, and it literally doesn't seem to have made any kind of performance impact to us. If anything, maybe we're pulling, I don't know, I think it's not even clear to say it did anything to us other than give us a better experience of play, because now I can see more. And yeah, so let's go check out some ultra settings like we were trying to do there earlier and see how badly it crushes our performance, if it does at all. All right, so we'll just go back to the preset, set it to ultra. All right, so field of view is still at 100. Motion blur, I don't like it. Everything now is basically at a high or ultra setting. Again, no DLSS or RTX. Okay, and resolution scaling at 100%. Okay, and let's reset our frames. It feels a little bit more choppy. Yeah, it's measurably more choppy. Okay, so we're dipping down to low 20s now. Okay, so you can see too, my 1%, 0.1% look to have dropped a fair amount, not a ton. Still trying to render in at high speed the city at night, which would be, I would say, fair to say, harder to render in during the day because of all the extra reflections and shadows and all that stuff going on. Definitely the Ultra feels like it's approaching a level of potentially unplayable action. So I would have to say, okay, that's fine. We are playing on a Dell Optiplex on the what should be basically considered the recommended low settings, not the minimum settings, but the recommended lower end settings. So it's just the one category up from the Ultra minimum spec, and it's playable, very playable. Even on Ultra, I'd say, but honestly, to get a bit more smooth action, I would go back to high settings where we were before. Just for sake of kind of trying to create some chaos and maybe dip our frame rate. Let's get into a gunfight here. See if I can take out this cop. All right. Now I'm in big trouble. I didn't quite see where my frame rate dipped down to there. Guessing it didn't feel like performance went to a point. I mean, I was able to take out that person pretty easily, but I mean, it's still maintaining 20s. I'm not really seeing a dip. I would say this is even relatively playable at Ultra, but just for a few extra frames, I would definitely probably bump it up. I mean, I got like 20 people shooting at me at this point, so that's about as chaotic as it can get. You know, almost had a street light fall on my face. I'm not winning this fight for sure. I don't know what else to say, guys. I mean, I thought this was gonna be crazy unplayable, like just flat out stupid for an idea almost. And this definitely can get you by if you say you got the game for Christmas and you want to play it and you're afraid that, well, shoot, I don't have a very powerful PC. You can definitely play it for sure. So I don't know, I'm gonna let these guys kill me and we'll just pan back over to the camera and do some final concluding thoughts. Alrighty guys, so conclusion time, and this was a lot of fun. I'm actually just impressed. I can't believe that we're playing Cyberpunk on a Dell Optiplex that's under $300. But aside from Cyberpunk, let's quickly talk about some of the benchmarks that we ran through in general and in full. So we did the same benchmarks that we did on the i3 processor, and literally, as a recap, that's all we've changed on this system. Everything else stays the same. You know, we did the build before with putting in the GPU and the PSU, and we tested out with that i3, and it was okay. It could play some of the older, less demanding games like CSGO, Valorant, although it's not old, it's kind of got that same kind of low demand style play style. Apex Legends was really smooth with it. We started to kind of get stuttery with Fortnite, and then as you saw, Modern Warfare wasn't very playable at all on that i3. But now all of those games with this upgrade in the Xeon are playable, and they're playable well to a point where we could probably max out the frame rate quite a bit more by lowering down our quality and fidelity of those games as well, because we weren't hitting any CPU major bottlenecks like we were when we had the i3. And the great thing here being that the upgrade was only a $70 upgrade versus if you're looking for staying within the I category of processors, the i7 is what I'm referring to, being a i7 4770 or the 4790, which is just a mild bump up in this Haswell architecture, you're gonna spend double if not triple amount to get effectively the same performance upgrades that we did with here, the Xeon E3 1246 V3. Lastly, as we're talking about the benchmarks and the system specs now, just quickly hit on what we have in Cyberpunk. I got it pulled up on a screen here. So where this Optiplex falls under is basically what's considered the low recommended settings. Now what that means is they're saying for 1080p gameplay, graphics settings at high, we need an i7 4790, which as we know, we have basically a comparable or a comparable i7 4790 in our system already. So check, we got that. Lastly, it recommends 12 gigs of RAM at our, what we're considering this Dell Optiplex to fall under. And as you guys saw, we have 8 gigs in the system, and we never were hitting a max, and we never really experienced any massive anomalies other than maybe one moment, which I think I'm gonna chuck it up to game coding as, but we really were playing smooth even on ultra settings. All right, and then next what it is asking for in the list is a GTX 1066 gig, a GTX 1660 Super, or a Radeon RX 590. So we're basically fitting right in there. Although all those cards are a bit better performers than what we have here, we are like within the 10% less performance window of that having an RX 570 8 gigs. So we're doing just well, I'd say. And then of course, with pretty much any game that you're playing, I would say put it on an SSD, but they're recommending an SSD, and they do that across the board. But all in all, the game is playable, absolutely. You just have to understand how to temper your expectations. What you're after here is not a competitive shooter style game. You're after a storyline, a high fidelity, a full immersion of experience. And even though we're not getting that super high quality immersion experience with this Dell Optiplex, we're getting a pretty good looking game still, and we don't have to spend a ton of money. So even if you consider the price of the game being $65 and the price that we paid for building and upgrading this Dell Optiplex, we still come in well under $400. So that doesn't even begin to touch the cost that you would spend on a console, which if you can find one, being a PS5 or the new Xbox, you're gonna spend around $500, $600 plus game, plus maybe another controller, plus whatever else, you know, you're already probably 2x the value of this Dell Optiplex. All in all, I'd say I thought I was gonna have to really dig into settings to try to make this Dell Optiplex play this game, and I basically just fired up right out of the box and it's playable, and that was just astounding to me, and I'm happy. So I'm glad to be able to share that with you guys, because now you know kind of a good target for about $300 what it can really get you. Basically, you can play anything. within expectation. So guys, if you're looking to do a build like this, then I'll put links to this build down in the description. It'll be all the eBay links that I used and some of the other areas that I pulled for parts to build this machine, and I'll definitely get you off to the races because, as you can see, it games really well. But aside from all that, guys, if you enjoyed this content, then make sure you do the YouTube thing, right? Give me a like if you enjoyed this content, and let me know in the comments. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on me embarking on this, yes, another Dell Optiplex video, but it seems to do well with the channel, and honestly, I think I have the most fun with these types of videos because seeing what the ultra budget can really get you, and as we can see, we can still play some of the greatest, most fun games out there. But other than that, if you stuck with the video this long, then I'd like to say thanks for tuning into this one. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.